One of the things that Congress has given U.S. aid since this full-scale invasion began is an unprecedented amount of money in direct budget support, which sounds kind of obvious. Of course, we would do that. We want to stand with Ukraine, but it's totally unprecedented, this kind of scale of investment. And we're talking along the lines of about $15 billion in a sense, cash to the Ukrainian government, which was famously corrupt, you know, in past years and still has work, as you noted, to do on corruption today. I don't know if we could have gotten that money out of Congress if not for DIA. Because what DIA allows us to do is that direct budget support goes, yes, to the Ukrainian government, but then it goes to pay teachers, to pay healthcare workers, to pay first responders. And there's a digital trail. It's not, you know, some official deciding this or that. It actually is going directly into the bank accounts in a manner that just, it would have been untraceable in a prior regime.
Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. Sorry you had to suffer through that. That was USAID Director Samantha Power speaking at a conference in Washington, D.C. this week. The conference was held to promote a U.S.-supported digital ID mobile app being utilized in Ukraine called the DIA app. According to our next guest, the app was built by Google and Visa under the watch of USAID, which should start setting off alarm bells for everyone already. The U.S. government's funding the salaries of Ukrainian workers through the app, which digitizes medical records, banking information, biometric data, and almost every other aspect of a person's life. This app has been called the State in a Smartphone, and it connects about 19 million Ukrainians to over 120 government services and allows citizens to access those services, such as applying for state benefits. The agency plans to introduce this app in other countries as well, though some populations may not be so keen on giving the state complete access to all their most sensitive and private data. And while the U.S. government bankrolls Ukraine's economy at the expense of the U.S. economy, we're still waiting for the anticipated counteroffensive against Russia to commence. Even some Ukraine supporters were skeptical at this point, including journalist Chris Nicholson, a pro-Ukraine commentator who compares the situation in Ukraine to the Hunger Games in his new article for the Center for the Study of Partisanship and Ideology. In his article, Nicholson observes, quote, "This has clearly become a proxy war between Russia and NATO, supercharging the political considerations inherent to any war. Ukraine's goal is to wheedle as much military aid as humanly possible out of NATO, especially the United States. The United States' goal is more complex: give enough aid to push Russia back, but not so much that its proxy war with Russia escalates into an actual one," end quote. He continues saying, quote, "This dynamic has created a Hunger Games scenario where Ukraine is constantly playing to the cameras to cajole extra gifts from the wealthy sponsors who watch its every move over the internet in real time," end quote. Joining us now to discuss is Max Blumenthal, editor for The Gray Zone. Max, thanks for being here tonight.
Great to see you.
Great. So I know many Americans got to watch the Vietnam War, or at least parts of it, play out almost in real time in their living rooms on TV. But does this war right now in Ukraine, this proxy war between the U.S. and Russia, seem to have perhaps an even more dystopian and even technocratic feel to it?
It's dystopian and also sociopathic, because you have figures in Washington like Lindsey Graham, perhaps the biggest neocon in the Senate, saying that this war that the objective of this war is to fight Russia down to the last Ukrainian. And so Americans watched Walter Cronkite announce the Vietnam War and Dan Rather's dispatches and saw their neighbors and friends dying in that war. And they got out in the streets and they protested. But in this war, it's Ukrainians dying on America's behalf, being shoveled into a slaughterhouse to weaken Russia. And Americans, well, they might wave a Ukrainian flag in front of their house, but they don't care that so many Ukrainian lives are being wasted in what appears to be a losing cause, while their corporate media covers up the reality of the war. Like, for example, that Bakhmut, the largest infantry battle after World War II, was substantially and comprehensively lost by Ukraine after some 60,000 casualties. This is a disaster for Ukrainian society, but Americans aren't feeling it. Certainly not the elites who are cheering this war on.